listeners. Welcome to tonight's very special presentation by GM Danielson. I'm your host, Jigsaw. Yes, that woke you. And you must be wide awake for the 6 terrifying stories about to be read. As any fan of my work knows, I prefer the dark, abandoned, forgotten, and lost, particularly when it comes to my locations for instructing greater humanity in gratitude. People are so ungrateful, but tonight, not you. For nothing makes a horror fiction fan happier than stories about creepy houses. As I said, I prefer an abandoned industrial warehouse for my work. And as such, I have carefully selected these 6 stories with my preference in mind. So without further talk, let us delve into the realm of terror with our first tale of horror.
There was a thread on the main page asking cops if they have ever experienced anything creepy or odd at a crime scene. I posted the following story, and some people said I should submit it over here. I'm new here, so be gentle. This is the entire post, but the second story is the one that got the most attention. I've seen a lot of suicides, but one sticks out. This elderly female had her adult daughter living with her. She called us because she hadn't seen her daughter for 2 days and hadn't heard her moving around upstairs. The stairway going up was very narrow, and at the top was a direct 90-degree turn into the bedroom. The mother was too elderly to climb the stairs, so she called us. We get there and enter the bedroom and find the daughter dead. She hung herself by tying the rope from her robe around her neck and the other end to the bedpost. Then she just laid on the floor and let her weight compress the rope. Seemed odd because she could have easily just sat up or lifted herself up to keep from being strangled. Almost wouldn't thought her body would have done it on its own as a defense mechanism. Anyway, we untie her and check vitals, but she's gone. We need to check the body for signs of trauma, so we do that. As we're turning her over, the air escapes from her lungs and she goes, and I feel the air blow over my arm. It grossed me out big time. Anyway, we couldn't get her out of the room because the stairway was too narrow. Ambulance arrives and we strap her to a backboard and lower her out the window and down the ladder of the fire truck. I felt terrible for the mother because she was in hysterics, and her daughter being tossed out the upstairs window with the whole neighborhood watching. I never found out any details about her body afterwards, so I don't know if she took pills and then laid down and passed out, etc. But that method of suicide struck me as very odd. Next, got an alarm call to a home where someone had committed suicide the year before. The house was still owned by the family, but it sat unused. No one lived there. Another officer and I clear the house and advise dispatch that everything is kosher. No forced entry anywhere, but the back door was unlocked. We contacted the owner and he told us he leaves it unlocked. Whatever. Anyway, we're in the house just looking around, remarking how it's a shame that the house just sits there unused. The other officer goes to take a leak and I'm standing there in the living room when I hear footsteps upstairs. Now, we check the entire upstairs. Each room, every closet, bathroom, etc. My partner yells from the bathroom, "Are those footsteps?" He comes out zipping up and we rush upstairs. Nothing. Doors to the rooms are open. We check each room again. Each closet, everywhere. The upstairs is flat out empty. There wasn't even furniture left in the house. He's in one room and I'm in another when I feel this coldness enter the room. It was just a cold that felt like it encompassed my entire body. Then it was as if someone in front of me shoved me with both hands. It was a very distinct feeling of two hands shoving me backwards by pushing my chest. I'm a cop. Normally someone shoves you and it's game on. But this time there was no one there, just an empty room. I must have sat there with a stupid look on my face for maybe a second or two. Then I left the room completely creeped out. I met my buddy in the hallway and he tells me I look weird. I tell him what happened and he says, "Yeah, this place is fucking creepy. Let's bounce." It was daytime, and the house was fully lit, as there were no curtains or shades on any of the windows. Later, I told my supervisor about it, and he said he went to an alarm call there as well, and as soon as he went inside, he got that creepy feeling where it feels like you're being watched.
So, the police don't always have the nerve to endure a true haunting, or the power to explain the unseen. But I already know the many weaknesses of the law, their inability to appreciate how people can be shown meaning and purpose. Sometimes what we think we see is just a lie. Sometimes when we think we're safe, we are on the cracked edge of disaster. Such was the case with my many unsuspecting patients, and such is the case with a girl and her friend who don't know the secret hidden within their strange neighbor's old house.
This actually happened to me when I was younger. I'm just typing this straight out, so there'll be no fancy script or editing. Here goes. When I was 10 years old, I was seriously into spy stuff. Anything to do with spies, I wanted it, and that was that. I had a little notebook beside my bed that I would write down all of the car registration plates in my estate down in to keep track of everyone and to identify potential intruders. I never did find anything interesting, but in my young mind I was the next Harriet the Spy. Love that movie. I used to share my spy activities with April, the girl next door, because she indulged them and seemed to enjoy snooping about with me. My mom had bought a set of binoculars during the Celtic Tiger because, well, she could. Once I discovered these, I used them constantly to look at birds up close in the sky, at people far down the street, and of course, into my neighbors' houses. The neighbor directly across from my house was a single man in his 40s who very much kept to himself. I would sometimes watch him through my binoculars, but he was boring, would always just sit in his bedroom. April and I would make up stories about his house being haunted, and we'd freak ourselves out so much that at least one of us would go home pretending to feel unwell. When April suggested that we ditch the baby crap and become real spies, I was intrigued. The plan was to sneak into our neighbor's creepy house. That was it. We were only 10, and we had no agenda. Our supposed creepy neighbor always left his kitchen window open, even when he was at work, so we just climbed in. It was about 4 p.m. in the day, in the middle of July. It was hot, sunny, and we were very much alone in this man's house. I always get this feeling of pure terror whenever I enter a premises I'm not supposed to be. It's the stress of being caught that has always freaked me out. Anyway, I remember feeling that sort of fear, but April was giddy and jogged up the stairs. I waited in the kitchen, eyes fixed on the frosted front door, and half imagining the creepy neighbor's shadow to suddenly appear. Michelle?" I could hear April's weak voice stammer my name from upstairs, and I immediately didn't like it. I had to get out. I quickly climbed out of the kitchen window and ran back across the road, leaving April alone in that creepy neighbor's house. I knocked at April's door and told her grandmother, who she lived with, where she was. Relief washed over me as I watched the small, fat old woman waddle across the road to get her granddaughter. Before she reached the front door, April burst out, wide-eyed and crying. My mom would not tell me why the police came by, but I secretly watched with the binoculars from my bedroom window as they made the creepy neighbor's dull, quiet house come to life with lights and loud talking. I looked inside his bedroom where 2 policemen were standing side by side, staring at the wall, at pictures on the wall. I will never forget that moment when I finally got those binoculars into full focus and saw myself in a framed photo on the creepy neighbor's wall. I was in my own front garden making a daisy chain. I must have been about 2 years old. That's when I noticed the others. There were about 50 pictures of me at all different ages on my neighbor's bedroom wall. He was arrested at work that day, a caretaker in the local primary school. That's all I can remember from that time. April and I never spoke again after the incident, but she still lives next door to me and has her own daughter called Lila. It still shakes me, 14 years later, that while I was out spying on the neighbors, there was one spying on me. And all along, I never knew.
As someone who retains pictures of all my victims and future prey, I can appreciate the style of the creepy instructor in that old house. Sad that the little girl could not appreciate the efforts of her watcher. I know the frustration when one's plans are spoiled all too well. From a strange man in an old house, we visit another mansion of terror, this time where the house itself is the entity of doom. But will the boy escape? Listen to Unit 522 in order to find out.
When I was 12, my parents and I moved to another state. The house they chose was built in the 1960s by an architect who designed it himself. It was in the shape of a T, with the stem of the T being the large master bedroom, my bedroom being in the furthest left of the T, with also 2 living rooms separated by a kitchen also in the top of the T. The way to the front door of the house was to actually walk past a beautiful stained glass window that took up the entire east wall of my parents' bedroom and into the crook of the T on the right side. Needless to say, it was a weird house. It also had a basement. The basement had a deep freezer room, an office, and an incredibly creepy crawl space that opened up into a giant cavern of dirt piles as far as you could see with a flashlight. That pretty much made up the underbelly of the whole house. In the backyard was a giant slab of concrete that looked like it had been haphazardly added, apparently to fill in a pool. Now, I was 12, but I wasn't an idiot. This house was not child-friendly, and it was incredibly weird. It didn't help that my bedroom was so far away, and this house was so old and bizarre that if I yelled in my bedroom, you couldn't hear it from the other side of the house. Skip to night 1 in the new place. I hate it. I curled up in my little twin bed, trying to get used to the weird sounds and sights that the house has, and not really understanding why I was banished to this corner of the house where it was the coldest. The screen to one of my windows rushes in the wind from outside, and I take off running to my parents' bedroom. I slept in their bed that night. After a few nights of this, my parents finally decide I have to sleep in my own bed. No questions. I am given a little stuffed dog to keep me company, who I named Sherlock. I was kind of worried about him discovering bones in the basement. Of course, I ended up taking off running back to my parents' bedroom and slept cuddled between two annoyed parents. Finally, my mom decides enough is enough. I can sleep in the room closest to the bedroom on a large chair. Now, this chair is right next to the basement door, and also to the back door. I agree to sleep in the big chair because I have never been allowed to before, and also, it's as close as I can get to my parents' bedroom without getting them upset. I throw a million blankets in a pile and nest onto the chair for the night. Surprisingly, Sherlock and I do seem to fall asleep quickly. At some point in the night, I wake up to what sounds like footsteps on the basement stairs, and the basement door is open. I scream so loud that my dad comes running out. He slams the basement door so that he has a clear view of me trying to become part of the furniture. "Why did you open this for? Are you trying to scare yourself?" "Dad, I didn't open the door. It was already open." At this point, my mom comes out to comfort me, but she doesn't seem at all calm. Her hands shake as she helps me get untangled from the blankets. She takes me to their bedroom and we fall asleep, albeit after a few bedtime stories. I wake back up to the sounds of more feet, this time on the carpet. I lie completely still and hope the noises stop, but then I heard whispering. I nudge my mom, and she just rolls back to her position. I then poke my dad's arm. Nothing. "Mom," I whisper right into her ear. I then heard somebody whispering back at me from the dark.
No.
Sharp and loud, like a curse word. I scream loudly and clutch Sherlock to me, but neither of my parents moves. Something tries to grab my foot over top the blanket. I scream louder until my throat hurts. Both parents are still and breathing quietly. I stop screaming and listen, trying not to pant. I shake my mom. She is completely passed out. Giggling comes from the door by the bathroom, and I hear it creak open. The green clock numbers on the dresser glow against the door, so I can see it begin to move. As I remember it, the numbers actually start counting backwards, flipping slower and then faster and faster, until it was almost blinking. Two sunken eyes seem to glare at me from the corner, and I leap over my dad to the other side of the bed. The bedroom door is deadbolted. My parents did this to make me feel safer, but now there's no way out. I hear the door bump against the dresser and I panic. I grab something heavy. It was a box or a book off my dad's nightstand, and I throw it at the stained glass window, and it bounces off. Something grabs my foot and pulls me under the bed, where I fight and scrape and hit at the soft leathery thing that is trying to hold me down. I feel sharp pains, and I hear snuffling like a runny nose, and there was a flurry of limbs, almost like a giant spider. I finally connect with something hard enough to get out from under the bed. I threw the object again at the window, finally shattering it, and I ran out through the front gate into the street. I run for a long time, making sure whatever it was wasn't behind me anymore. I then don't really remember what happened after that. My parents told me they later found me curled up on a bench at the elementary school about a half-mile down the road. I had stained glass in my hair, a black eye, and my left arm was broken. I had numerous cuts and bruises around my ankles and neck. We moved out of that house as fast as possible, sleeping in a hotel until it was all packed up. The police believe I may have fought off an intruder who broke the stained glass wall to attack my parents. They had no other explanations to give me. The person I see for counseling says that as a child, I had to find something tangible to rebel against, since I was not happy about the move. The beautiful stained glass wall was the focal point of the house and was the easiest to fixate on, especially since my mother loved it and it was something really easy to destroy. The wounds I suffered were likely self-inflicted as I ran, possibly in a sleepwalking state, through the streets until I ended up at the school. However, when I asked my mom about that night, she said she was shaken too, because the basement door had a key lock on it, and only my dad had the keys. They were in his nightstand that night, and she had made sure to lock it because she was afraid I might go explore in the basement and fall down the stairs. She really has no idea how it opened. To this day, I still have night terrors of that thing with its dark pits for eyes, grabbing at my ankles and pulling me under the king-sized bed. I still don't know how my parents didn't wake up through all of the screaming. My therapist says I must have dreamt it, but I didn't dream of the glass breaking. Surely they would have heard that.
It is a good thing the boy escaped with his life. As one who doesn't let many of my victims off easy, I can say for certain that this boy is grateful for his life. Have you ever wondered if a house is more than wood, brick, and paper? If it is a being that haunts us in our waking and sleeping lives? You may not know of any such houses where you live, but there is a story of an old Japanese house whose dark, foreboding cloud terrorized a young girl. Allow Let's Read to explain the strange occurrence.
I should start off by saying my brother is not only a military man, but he's your basic hetero, never let them see you cry cliche of a military man. He's not afraid of anything. Well, except for the entire country of Japan. This is his story. My brother joined the Marines when he was 18 and was stationed in Japan. He really enjoyed his time there for a while, the girls specifically. He made friends with some of the Japanese guys his age who worked around the base. On nights where him and his soldier friends had the night off, the local Japanese guys would show them around, bring them to bars, introduce them to girls, etc. One night, after a little drinking and no luck with girls, the guy invited my brother home to play video games. My brother accepted the invite and they played video games for a few hours. During this time, he tells my brother the main reason he wanted to get home early was because his little sister had been suffering from night terrors, causing her to wake up screaming, crying, and sometimes vomiting. He was worried about her and wanted to be home in case she had an episode. At this point in the story, I should explain how this guy's house was shaped. The house was built in the shape of a horseshoe with a garden in the middle. His bedroom was at the very edge of one side of the U shape and his sister's all the way on the other end, so they are essentially across the garden from each other. If he looks out of his window, he can see into hers and vice versa. So anyways, they decide to call it a night, and the Japanese guy walks over to the window to look across the garden into his sister's window to check on her. He lifts the blind and peers out for a fraction of a second before jumping back screaming and looking at my brother like he just saw something horrible. My brother then goes to look and he stops him. He tells him that he saw a dark cloud with red eyes hovering over his sister's sleeping body. My brother, naturally, doesn't believe him and decides to look for himself. He creeps quietly over to the window and lifts the blind, but this time, he finds himself eye to eye with what he describes as a dark black puff of smoke with the face. My brother and this other guy admit that they got under the covers and stayed there until it was light outside, too afraid to lift the blankets and see that the smoky figure had come a little closer and was in the room with them, just on the other side of the thin sheets. I don't know what to believe. Or maybe they drank more than what they said they did that night and imagined it all. But I know my brother believes what he saw. He sticks to his story, and when he tells it, he looks like someone who saw something truly sinister.
I hope it doesn't surprise you that I have no sympathy for that little girl. I've helped so many ungrateful people overcome their sicknesses that I see her as just a patient of that house, being cured of her childish fear of death and weakness by a supernatural power. My arts are nothing compared to so grand a device as of a dark entity. For our fifth tale, we must go from houses possessed by strange forces to a house possessed by nothing at all, except for the empty material remnants of the lives that once lived there. But only by listening to GM Danielson's tale will you learn if just tables and plates remain.
As a child, I lived with my grandmother in rural northeast Georgia in the early 1960s. One of my favorite pastimes was to explore all the trails I would come across with my dog. Up the hill and through the woods from my grandmother's house, I found an old 2-story house with faded white peeling paint that had been closed up for many years. I was told to not go poking around up there, so of course, that's exactly what I wanted to do. The path through the woods was overgrown and pretty hard to see. The trees were still and quiet, with no bird calls or chattering squirrels as I walked up to the door. It was locked, of course, so I peeked through a dusty window and discovered that I was able to push it up. After climbing in, I saw the house was fully furnished. The windows all had dusty, filmy curtains. The living room was furnished with a sofa, 2 chairs and end tables, and there were doilies on the tables and sofa back. There were also lamps, bookcases, knickknacks, and a small ornate organ near the front door. There were even a few old pictures on the walls. Dust lay thickly on everything. There was a dark, narrow staircase in the living room that went upstairs. The kitchen was right next to the living room, and there I discovered a long wooden table that had 5 place settings laid, along with silverware, bowls, and glasses that still contained the remains of old dried-up food and drink. There were even a couple of pans on the old stove and some dirty dishes still in the sink. About that time, I started feeling prickles on my arms and felt like someone was watching me. I was way too scared to go up the stairs and hurriedly climbed back out through the window. 54 years later, during a Skype visit I was having with my older brother, I told him about the experience I had in the old house, when I noticed he had a funny look on his face. When I asked him what was wrong, he told me he had done the same exact thing years earlier, except he had climbed a tree next to the house and went in through the second-story window. He said that there were 3 bedrooms just as fully furnished as the rooms below, and that the one closet door he opened was full of clothes. He, too, said he had begun feeling like he was being watched, and that the air felt heavy and he decided he had better get out. We both were amazed at our similar experiences. Although I tried and tried, I was never able to find out what happened to the occupants of that old house. My grandmother would never talk about them. The house was later razed to the ground, and nothing has been built there to this day. I've always wondered what in the world would make a family leave their home in such a hurry that they left in the middle of their meal, abandoned all their possessions, apparently never to return.
Just when you thought a creepy house needed a spirit or a presence to haunt you, think again. In a true house of terror, even a table still set for a dinner never eaten can cause dread. But what if a house isn't evil because of an existing spirit, but instead becomes evil by the actions of a person? For our last tale, Unit 522 has a truly chilling account of a mother whose wicked deed poisoned her home forever and left it covered in mysterious ash.
My brother had a creepy experience with a house during his time in Japan. He sent me an email of the story. Instead of rewording everything he says and giving it to you in a third-person perspective, plus I'm lazy, I'm just going to copy and paste it and let you read it. Hey, I don't mind you posting about the house. Just don't put my name or anything like that. Don't put yours either. And don't go to any chat rooms or Skype, ever. Chat roulette doesn't exist. I'm only kidding. You're still just a kid to me. Anyways, here it goes. I'll try to remember the best I can. I guess it all began when my friend Jesse started dating this Japanese girl named Chi. We were talking about watching a movie about a haunted house, and Chi didn't want to watch it. She said she knew of a real haunted house. She told us about the house on the cliffside in a dead forest. I know what you're thinking, not the suicide forest. She just meant all the animals there were dead or something like that. So we basically convinced her to take us there. Just me and Jesse at this point. She takes us on a drive that ends in the middle of nowhere, next to a trail in the woods. There was a little chain tied to 2 trees that wasn't doing much to keep people out, since it was dropped to about ankle height. All we had to do was step over it to enter the trail. Chi told us that she was staying in the car, and nothing we did could convince her otherwise. So me and Jesse head down the trail and walk for about 10 minutes until we got to the point in the forest where everything got silent. It's not like it was loud before. I didn't even notice the noises like the sound of crickets, birds, buzzing of insects, and things like that. When it becomes completely silent, it just hits you. There are no animals in that part of the woods. Me and Jesse just took one look at each other, and we both read each other's minds. We turned around and ran. We ran without stopping the whole way back. I didn't hear anything, but it just felt like something was chasing us. I beat Jesse to the end, and was almost in the car when I heard a thump and yell I turned and saw Jesse on the ground. The chain rope that was ankle height had somehow caught him in the stomach. It left a mark and everything. I had to help him up, and we got out of there. But fuck that, we were getting to the bottom of this shit. So we got 4 more guys together, brought flashlights and guns, and went back. It was scarier in the dark, but with the other guys, we felt safe. We made it all the way to the end of the path this time. We knew that we were coming up on something near the water, because we could hear waves crashing against the cliff. Sure enough, when we got to the clearing, we were on the edge of a cliff. We were all facing a little house that looked like no one lived in it for at least 10 years. We went inside, and found that it looked like the family that lived there just disappeared. All of their belongings were tossed everywhere, but that could have been from people ransacking the place. I'm not sure. But it looked like clothes, dishes, and furniture were still there, just left behind and forgotten. The most alarming thing though, and the first thing you noticed, was the walls. The fucking walls. Every inch of the walls in every room was covered in ash. Not just like painted in ashes either. It was covered in words written in ash in some weird language. Latin if I had to guess. It looked like someone dipped their finger in ash, then started at where the wall met the ceiling, and began writing something. Then when they got to the end of that wall, they made a new line right underneath. It continued until the wall met the floor, and they went to the top of the next wall. I can't imagine how much time that took. The creepiest thing is that Jesse told me that he asked Chi in private what she had heard about that house, and she told him that the legend says a mom who lived there went crazy one day and killed her husband and 4 children. She turned herself in and said she killed them and burned their bones. The bodies were never found, and the lady spent the rest of her life locked up in some asylum. It makes me wonder though, about all that ash. How much ash would it take to cover your walls if you burned 5 bodies? Would that be enough? I don't know. Crazy shit. Anyways, I won't be able to sleep after thinking about it. Next time you send me an email, ask me about sunshine and rainbows.
You made it to the end of our little show. You must be just about ready to run in fear. Or else you've already left for the safety of your own home. But I must warn you, after all, like these stories show, any house can be haunted and full of evil lurking at the edge of your subconscious mind. My special thanks to Let's Read and Unit 522 for their assistance in helping me help those who don't appreciate the peace of their home appreciate it a little bit more. Here's to collaborating in the future and to the success of creepypasta the world round. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Horror Readings by GM Danielson. Rate, comment, and like this video if you can, and check out the numerous other stories on his channel. This is Jigsaw, reminding you to appreciate the peace of your home, because you never know when the one next to yours is haunted.